So welcome back. This is now episode 3, MTMM Radio. So what are we going to be talking about today, Ben?
So today we're going to have a little bit of a chat about the different reasons that we might see scale fluctuation that have zero to do with body composition change. This is definitely one of those conversations that we have over and over and over again. And I think as part of what we try to do to build some awareness around, why things might be occurring that have absolutely nothing to do with your levels of effort or your, attention to detail that you're putting in. Because I think inherently we do see a lot of association or, people using the scale weight as their number one indicator of progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we're about to chat about, there's a whole lot of multitude of reasons why we do not advise against for doing that.
Yeah, and it baffles me because for as long as I've been involved in the health and fitness industry, it's always been a common thing for people to say, don't listen to the scale doesn't matter. What you see on the scale is a reflection of your progress. But still, we have such a difficult time, everybody drilling that into our heads, okay, this is not actually a reflection of our progress. So I think that what's going to be able to change that, or what we're hoping to do with this, is a little bit more of a deeper understanding of what that could actually be, rather than just having people tell you no, it doesn't matter. That's not actually how you're progressing. Actually understanding the reasons it could be, I think will hopefully help people in those situations.
Well, I think for sure, generally speaking, there's an element of ignorance that stems from fear, right? Or fear that really stems from ignorance. And I guess that's a part we do is try to use education to empower, right? And so, I would say without doubt, emphasis on scale weight is probably the number one most overutilized point of interest sold by the industry, right? Mm-hmm. And inherently what we see as the most damaging repercussion from that is that a discrepancy nearly always occurs between what someone's goal weight is and potentially what a healthy weight or an optimal weight for that person might be. And I don't think I've ever seen really realistically anyone's goal weight that has the goal of weight loss being higher than that optimal weight. Right.
Because there's so many other things at play too. When you're looking to lose weight, you're also building muscle and all of that we all know and have heard a million times before.
Yeah, of course. And I think, we are in such a market or an industry that is so hyper-focused on weight loss and has so much fear surrounding, eating too much that we skim over and no one really ever discusses that there are a number of health issues associated with eating too little.
Right.
So anyway, what are we doing? A 10-minute AMRAP today?
Yeah, 10-minute AMRAP. I got the timer going. Right. But on this note of the importance of the scale, I think that maybe we should touch on the fact that, for example, you just competed in a weight class-based sport. And in those kind of instances, the scale weight has to matter. So how, can I ask you, how mentally are you able to accept that is something that you do have to measure your progress by? And does that affect you at all in terms of looking at your progress?
I think definitely probably our weightlifting community our weightlifting client base, they're really the only clients where we are really, really making sure we're keeping on top of what the scale weight says, because you're right. Ultimately, there's an element of the sport that requires the scale weight to be at, a certain point. But I think one thing that we see even within the weightlifting community, and especially for recreational level athletes, is there's an element of wanting to cut weight, right? Wanting to, have a badge of honor of dropping a weight class and whatever else. And whether that be stemmed from competing at a point where the numbers potentially the total aren't quite there to compete, in the weight class that you're presently sitting in. So you're trying to qualify for different levels by dropping weight class, whether that just be getting caught up in the fact that it seems to be something that everyone within the sport is doing, right? From a personal perspective, I guess I'm pretty lucky with the last kind of round of changes that they changed the weight class to essentially be my walk around weight anyway. So the cut for me wasn't very difficult, and even really for the level that I'm at, this doesn't really make a difference whether I cut or not. I'm not looking to qualify for nationals or anything like that. So it's more just the sport is weightlifting, right? Not weight making. Like, and I think the attention is better off. Like if you're not snatching your body weight, if you're not cleaning and jerking up towards like 1.25, maybe 1.5 times body weight, and you're worried about, what weight class you're going in, generally the conversation is maybe the attention's a little bit misplaced.
Right. Should be on the strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, definitely what we can see is when we do have our athletes, have that conversation where it can be hard to accept that maybe we should be in a weight class higher than we're presently in. But if you can get past that, you often see some really big strength gains and some really big increase in numbers because they're better fed, they're more fueled, right? They're able to hit those numbers, recover faster from training, and therefore train more often. And it generally, as most things with weight loss, there tends to be more of that mental battle that you're trying to accept the fact that it's okay to weigh more than potentially you want to weigh or you think you should weigh, right?
It's a bit of a shift of focus.
Yeah. I think, and again, like we have a good habit, Mags, of you and I, of like, these are the topics that we're going to set out. We're going to stick to it. I think it's important to realize that, even we call them, when we talk about weight cuts, we're not necessarily talking about fat cuts, right? Well, we're literally talking about being able to manipulate the scales in a way that has nothing to do with body composition in order to make the weight required, right?
And be able to eat as much as possible in order to perform as optimally as possible while keeping control over the scale.
Exactly right. So I think we probably need to differentiate that there's a difference between cutting weight for a competition, which is literally go in, weigh in, and then you're eating and rehydrating, and you're actually competing much heavier than you just weighed in at, right? As opposed to general weight loss goals where, like, if you're doing things that are just manipulating the scale but not affecting your body composition and all, then you're not actually progressing forward despite what the scale might be saying.
Right. And in both instances, whether you're cutting weight for competition or you're just focused on fat loss and body recomposition, the points that we're going to go over they pertain to both instances, and they're important to understand.
Yeah, it's 100%. I think the first one and the biggest one is worth chatting about is fluid, right? It is water retention and water shift. And there are a multitude of factors that can play into how much water, is within the system. And obviously that's going to affect scale fluctuations and not necessarily have anything to do, like we said, with body composition changes. Get up in the morning and jump on the scales and then take a piss. You've lost weight, right? Oh, goal achieved. You know what I mean? Or the opposite, jump on the scales and then drink a shaker of water and get back on the scales. Of course your weight's going to be up, right? Does that mean that you're heavier? Yeah, you are heavier. You just drank 500 mils, a liter of water, right? Does that mean you're fatter? Of course not. And that's inherently where the fear is that, any shift upward in scale weight, we automatically attribute it to fat gain.
Right. So what sorts of things can cause you to retain water other than simply drinking water or peeing?
Yeah, sodium would probably be without doubt the biggest factor. Okay, if you're going out for Vietnamese or typically a lot of those Asian foods that are quite high salt, you're gonna feel a little bit softer the next day, and you're gonna be sitting a little heavier on the scales. Even if you've worked out all the macros perfectly, all the calories perfectly, it fits within your profile. Where salt goes, water flows, right? You're going to retain more water, right? Big gym sessions, right, is probably the second biggest one. If you're having a really big pump up session and you're forcing those muscles to pull more fluid, into the muscle belly, you're going to be holding more water, right? I think that's probably one as well that, people assume I've just done so much exercise, surely I've lost weight.
Yes, I hear that all the time.
Yeah, it's completely the opposite. But yeah, I think those two are probably the two biggest for sure that we see.
And then what about stress?
This is, and I mean, with water being something that we can manipulate and that we really can statistically or using trends really predict how the body's going to respond. With sodium and with fluid, stress is just the complete opposite, right? Yeah. And I think generally as a society, we really underestimate the imposition that stress levels can have on the body. And when we're talking about stress, your body doesn't, differentiate the difference between stress coming from a really high intensity workout or stress coming from a deadline that's coming up at work or stress coming from any change in routine, right? Anything that's taking the body out of what its usual function is going to be stressful. And part of that stress is fluid retention, is lack of sleep, all these different things that are going to affect scale weight. Right?
Exactly. And I think that that's one of the things that people have a difficult time understanding, because, for example, if you eat a bunch of salty food, that's a direct correlation to your weight. Like, that makes sense. But if you're talking about stress, I think it's really difficult for somebody to be like, well, how is my emotional state affecting this number on the scale? So I think that that's something that's really important to understand in order to know that maybe you have to make some changes and some shifts elsewhere in your routine. Oh, there goes the alarm. I'll just extend that a little bit.
Maybe snooze that one.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a post the other day where we were talking about stress, and I kind of clipped, like, if people demonize stress like they do pasta or bread, like you actually would see much more favorable long-term body composition change, right? And that's an element as well of becoming so hyper-focused on what the scale says at all times, that that's really going to lead to some pretty poor behavioral adaptation as well, right? And that probably cues and segues into the next point with weight loss. And one of the reasons why we don't necessarily want to use aesthetics or scale weight as direct markers of health is because you can improve your aesthetic, right, by doing some really unhealthy things, right? Like, you kind of look at the image that we sort of hold up within the industry as peak health, and having a 4 or 5% body fat percentage, number one, is not maintainable, but number two, isn't healthy, right? So when we get to like our stage competitors, and it's, the only sport in the world where you're actually at your physical weakest at your day of peak performance, right?
Yeah,
figure that
doesn't make
out,
sense.
And then we sort of stem from that too. Like, how many people do you know that have done a show, and then all of a sudden that, like, picture of dehydration and depletion, while it's an achievement of sorts that you've had the discipline to get there, then becomes the Facebook profile picture, right? And then becomes the, like, oh, that's what I want to walk around at all day, right? And then you always see on the flip side too, and so they step off stage and start getting stuck into all the things that they deprive themselves of for 12 weeks, 16 weeks, and start rehydrating. Of course, they're not going to be, 5-6%, right? And then that can lead to even more stress, right? Not to mention the hormonal imbalance that comes from all that deprivation, and then going completely the opposite way straight away as well.
And that's more long-term in terms of weight gain, right? And I think one more point that's kind of simple is just the timing that you're going to hop on the scale. Whether and at the time that you're eating your last meal the day before. I think that's something that sometimes goes a little bit overlooked as well, is if you're eating a meal late at night, later than you're used to, the scale is going to be a little bit heavier in the morning. And if you're weighing yourself at 4 a.m. in the morning versus 11 a.m. in the morning before your first meal, before any water, that sort of thing, the number is going to be a bit different because your body has a different amount of time to process.
If you're following your templates, right, and you're having 250 grams of chicken with 150 grams of broccoli and 150 grams of sweet potato, then all of a sudden, you have a shaker of water, that's an 800 gram meal, right? So you've got 800 grams of weight now sitting in your digestive tract, right? Does that mean you've put on a kilo?
No.
Right. I think we definitely will do probably pretty soon one of these specifically surrounding sleep. But sleep is where the magic happens, right? It's where all the fluid is shifted. It's, where all the recovery is done, all the fat is really displaced and moved. And so once we start tipping into how much sleep you're getting a night, if you're eating later, if you're waking up earlier than normal, of course that's going to have an effect on the scale. So I think, like, as well, being mindful of the time, to summarize everything we've sort of just spoken about, it's like, stop putting so much stock into what the scale says day to day, right? If as your coaches we're not concerned so much in the day to day, why would you be? Right?
Exactly.
Definitely, we want to look at weeks, periods of weeks and months, and see what the trends are doing. But no one's weight loss goal or weight loss graph is perfectly linear the whole way down, right?
Yeah, I actually saw this post about a weight loss graph. I'll try and actually somehow put it in this video, because I think that it's a perfect representation of what you're saying. It's like the trend is going down, but the day to day.
Yeah. And so, we definitely want to look at trends over time. And like we're saying, there's going to be a multitude of factors that can come in and affect day to day that have nothing to do or aren't a direct reflection on how much effort you're putting in and, how much good work you're really doing. So to tie up that as your number one successful indicator of progress is a big mistake.
Yeah. And
we prefer to use pictures and measurements and all that sort of stuff where we can, visibly see change that might not be directly reflected on the scale.
Or just how you feel and how your clothes fit, like just simple things like that go a
I
long,
think
long, long way.
probably for the greater majority of our clients that come in with weight loss goals, once they begin to change their body composition and they really start to lean out and get stronger, they're not so fast on what they weigh anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because the goal was never weight loss, it was fat loss. And that's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah. And I think that a really big takeaway too is don't stress about the scale, because as we've already mentioned, that's not going to help the situation at all. So
don't lie there sleepless at night, not sleeping because you're stressed about what the scale is going to say in the morning, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm looking forward to talking about that in one of the upcoming episodes. So yeah, we'll wrap it up there.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, Mags.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. Talk to you soon.